What's up, folks? I'm Private Hudson, and this is The Last Haven, or Jank Haven, as I like to call it. This is a post-apocalyptic settlement builder that has been in early access since May 2020. A little over 2.5 years now. When I first started playing it, my initial impressions were negative. It appeared to be a very mediocre and barely playable Eastern European Banished clone with zombies. That opinion then changed to strongly negative when I came across a bug regarding soldiers. You start off with regular people and with soldiers. The soldiers automatically move around and patrol the map, taking care of the zombies themselves. The game doesn't have a proper tutorial, but it does have a poorly implemented hint system if you're playing the first map. This hint system is so poorly done that it doesn't even use the proper name for its own buildings. Example, it calls the Science Center a laboratory. Moving on, one of the hints tells you that you can select your soldiers and group them up like in a real-time strategy game by pressing Control key and a number key. So I did that, and yes, I had some sort of manual control over a group of soldiers. I could move them around and give them simple orders like crouch or change your fire rate. However, there's no way to disband this group, and I had no way of putting them back into patrol mode. You see, they start out in patrol mode, but putting them manually into patrol mode has not been implemented yet. So basically, they stand in place forever, and I would need to manually put every individual soldier on the edges of my settlement to make them effective again. I then tried a new game, and I realized that even if you manually control a soldier without putting them into group, you take him out of patrol mode. They will stay in the same spot you left them in. Yes, they will occasionally go back to get some food, but they will return and stand in that same spot where you left them till the end of time. 2.5 years in early access, folks. 2.5 years. At this point, a normal person would quit, but that's not me. I'm determined. I'm used to playing garbage games and finishing them. I'm used to playing mediocre games, and I'm used to playing Eastern European jank. As a result, I'm used to finding workarounds to broken shit. So, I started a new game again. This time, I didn't touch the soldiers at all. And guess what? They did a decent enough job by themselves handling the zombies. They patrolled by themselves and responded to attacks automatically, and while they start off with terrible aim, they level up as they get more kills. I thought to myself, okay, we should be good now. And then the temperature dropped to 0 degrees Celsius, all my greenhouses stopped working because it was too cold, and everyone froze to death because the shacks that I built weren't warm enough for my people. After much continued trial and error, I finally figured out how to play the game, and there's only one way to play it. First, just like every settlement builder out there, get your resource gathering and production buildings up first. Build a warehouse for storage, a sawmill for wood, a quarry for stone and coal, greenhouse for food, a resource station which picks up all the miscellaneous bits and bobs off the floor, and a science center. Do not build any shacks. There is no point. They're a waste of time and resources. Once you have your science center up and running, you must rush level 2 greenhouses and level 2 houses. I repeat, you must rush level 2 greenhouses and level 2 houses. Put the game on the fastest speed possible, since there's nothing else to do at this point. Once you research a new piece of tech, the speed will go back to normal. Open up that research menu again and select the next option on your way to the improved greenhouses and houses. This is a very exciting 15 minutes of doing nothing, just waiting for your research to finish. Absolutely exhilarating gameplay. You see, those buildings can survive temperatures up to -30 degrees Celsius, whereas the basic greenhouses and shacks do not. They stop functioning once it hits 0 degrees Celsius. Also, your settlers don't really complain about being homeless, which is why there's no point in building shacks. They only work and eat, but will go to places for warmth, which the shacks do not provide. And don't build level 1 houses either. Just wait for the level 2s. Why? They take up the same amount of space as level 1 houses, but they're taller, so they house more people. I've tested this several times and have timed it perfectly on all of the maps. Once you've finished researching all of these, which I call necessities, to actually play the goddamn game, that's exactly when it starts snowing and the weather hits 0 degrees Celsius. There's no room for error, no room for deviation, and no room for experimentation. If you do not follow this strategy every single time you start a new game, then everyone will starve and freeze to death around day 15 to day 20, depending on what map you pick. And guess what? At this point, the zombies disappear too. Apparently they don't like the cold. Maybe they've gone on to Florida or some shit. Yeah, that's right. The zombos are gone. Unlike Banished, which has rotating seasons, here it just keeps getting colder and colder. We playing Frostpunk now, boys! Coal becomes an important factor as everyone is burning it to keep warm, so research coal stations instead of relying on scavenging. Again, you always have the same exact research path to use. There's no way to deviate from it to survive. Now the coal stations, those use up trees, so you keep building more sawmills. At this point, marauders start visiting you. While you can keep them at bay by bribing them off, eventually they'll just start attacking you. Now you have some freedom to use the research tree, finally. And you can start improving your soldiers and unlock military buildings, as well as factories that can produce weapons, ammo, and armor. And you'll constantly need to expand to keep gathering resources because you cannot produce metal, polymers, and fuel. As you expand, you'll need to build warehouses everywhere. These are magical warehouses, folks, as they all carry your existing stockpile of goods. Meaning, if Mikola is on one side of the map and he wants to send Vanya a bottle of Harilka, who's on the other side of the map, he just needs to put it in his warehouse and then Vanya can access it from the one that's closest to him. One thing that I did not realize is that once you've built a resource collector, such as a gathering station, you then need to click on the resource that you want them to collect. I originally thought that these goods represent their current stockpile that's in the building that then needs to be transported to a warehouse. I thought wrong. What it actually represents are the available resources in that given area. Nothing in the game tells you this. Amazing design. There are 3 maps. While you can start in a different area every time you create a new game, the maps are the same and never change, and there are no randomly generated ones. The first map is the forest, or the one I call the Banished ripoff. It has the most amount of resources, but there's no building space, and it's the worst map in my opinion. You might be thinking that sawmills will clear up that space up. Yeah, eventually, but it takes forever to bring down a single tree. The map I spent the most amount of time on was the city, which is the 3rd map. This map has the fewest amount of resources, but the most amount of room to build. However, there's a lot of rubble and other shit everywhere that prevents you from building a normal-looking settlement. So yeah, my place looks like shit. I later found out that you can use dynamite to clear up cars and other junk from the map, but this wasn't mentioned anywhere in the game, since again, the game doesn't have a tutorial, and your civilians like to run into the explosion radius too. The city also has some buildings that you can repurpose as living quarters, so that you can get access to some level 3 and level 4 houses without having to research them, at least for now. The second map is the best. This one is the village. It has a decent amount of resources and a ton of building space too. This one is my favorite and the one where I had a more sensible settlement layout. Let's go over the resources real quick. You got wood. You got rock. Excellent English. Rock. Why isn't it called stone? All right. You got metal. You got polymers, which I'm assuming is just plastic. You got coal. You got fuel, electronics, peoples. Again, excellent English. Peoples. And you got, why is there no label for this one? It looks like a woman's face. Are women not peoples? At first, I wasn't sure why there was a distinction between men and women in this game. After all, there is no breeding. You need to rely on refugees coming into your settlement to increase your population. And then I realized that women can't become soldiers or police officers. They can only work in the kitchen and the greenhouses. I shit you not. I shit you not. One of the devs wrote, and I quote, "Women in the game cannot do all kinds of work, but men can do all." Interesting. And in another post that the dev locked, women in the game were planned to have a special role, places of work where men could not work. Are you suggesting brothels? Amazing. Alright. Let's continue. At this point, with every passing day, it's getting slightly colder and colder. Marauders keep visiting you more often, but you don't really have a solid way of defending against them other than manually controlling soldiers and sending them out to fight. Yes, I can build watchtowers, I can build fortified trenches, I can even build fortified walls with a locked gate, but each of these removes possible workers from my population pool to sit around in a building and do jack shit. And the enemy can invade from any direction, so none of these stationary buildings are practical. Especially the stupid gate, as it's not even wide enough to block off some of the roads in it, but it requires 4 people to man. Now yes, you can theoretically build walls all around your huge settlement and have gates in certain areas. Realistically though, there are not enough resources on the map to do this. A merchant sometimes drops by, but he doesn't sell resources, only guns and ammo. Oh, and pigs if you have a farm. So what do? Raid an enemy base, which, if successful, will also decrease the amount of raider attacks that you get. And this part of the game is possibly the worst of all. It reminds me of some of those unit-only levels in the original Command & Conquer, only worse and more primitive. So you gear up and you send out a squad, you basically run around a map trying to kill every enemy you see, except your units are mostly unresponsive to your commands. When you click on a point on the map you want them to go, they might go there, they might go somewhere else, they might go around a bit. There are no formations, and there's no attack move. Unbelievable. Once you kill everyone, you can loot some of the resources, but more importantly, once your battalion is back at base, you can send a squad of civilians that will turn that area into a resource generating facility. Here's the thing. You can get stuff like wood and coal and fuel, but you can't get metal. What? What do you do when you run out of metal on your map and there are no resource production buildings that can generate metal? Let's check the forums. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So what else can I shit on? Oh yeah, how about the civilian AI? When I played Surviving the Aftermath in early access, one of my favorite bugs was the sandworm bug. Basically, civilian is going around the map, minding his own business, to the middle of nowhere, probably to grab a resource or something. He runs into a sandworm, decides to get into a boxing match with it, and gets killed immediately. Damn. Thought he could have knocked that sucker down. This triggers another settler to go get the dead settler's corpse to put into the graveyard or strip him of his tools and bring them back to the colony before they rot out in the open. Of course, Settler 2 runs into the same sandworm, gets into a boxing match, round 2 motherfucker, and gets killed. This triggers Settler 3 to... Well, I think you can tell where I'm going with this. In the last haven, your settlers sometimes run outside their work area to stand around and do nothing. If they come across a zombie, they also get into a boxing match with them, and of course they get killed. Or they might run out into shootouts between your soldiers and marauders. Just brilliant pathing. Other things that are broken. So the only way that you can increase your population count is by accepting refugees. Doing so decreases your stability, and as the game goes on, your stability just goes down by itself for no reason whatsoever. There's a research tree that's supposed to counter those effects, but it's the most useless research tree in the game. 2 of those points give you a one-time stability boost that will obviously erode as the game goes on. As for the rest of it, well, there is a prison you can build. What does it do? Occasionally a cop will tell you he suspects someone of starting a riot, and you can imprison that person or ignore What happens if you choose either option? Well, if you imprison the guy, they go to the prison and nothing happens. And if you ignore it, nothing happens too. I checked the forums. Oh, Dev says prisons aren't working. Okay, good to know. Why are they in the game then? Why can't you disable a non-functioning building like other early access games do? Okay, next building is the propaganda station, which I cleverly built right next to the church. Aha. I can have 8 cops staffed there. What do? I don't know. No, absolutely nothing as far as I can tell. I'm assuming it's another non-working building. Oh, and you can unlock kitchens that create meals and bars that serve alcohol. What do? Well, other than draining your existing food supply, nothing as far as I can tell. There is a scaffolding that you can build where the events that sometimes appear above people's heads, if you click on those events will now accuse someone of treason and you can hang them for a minor stability boost. Now you'd think that expanding my settlement, raising up an army, holding off attacks from raiders and marauders, and even taking over their bases would remove any concerns regarding stability, right? Nope. Hanging your own people increases it. Incredible. The only building that actually increases stability is the church, because you can send everyone into the church real quick for a moderate stability boost, which of course it will erode away over time, but you can keep doing this. It has a pretty short cooldown. Best not to click on any of those events either and just let them time out. 90% of the time it's negative. Someone wants to run away, or someone has heard of a resource stockpile and wants to send a group out there. Usually they just end up dying. If you have scaffolding now and need a minor stability boost, then sure, you can click on those events now, and they'll probably be executions. Other things that just flat out suck or don't work at all. In Endzone, or just about any other game in this genre, if I click on a resource production facility, it tells me what the input is, it tells me what the output is, and I can control the amount it generates. I can put a limit on production. I can also hover over all my resources and know the production status of all of them, and I'm going to know if I'm going to be in a deficit soon. Can't do that here. If you put people on weapons manufacturing duty, they'll keep working on that shit until they run out of metal, and you won't even get a notification that you've run out of metal. Speaking of weapons manufacturing, in the beginning you can create all sorts of pistols, including the Desert Eagle and the Rhino revolver. Now these use the same 1 unit of metal to manufacture them, but so does the Glock, and so do some of the other pistols. But the Deagle and Rhino have better range, better damage, and better accuracy. So why on earth would I ever want to manufacture any pistols other than these revolvers? Now you're thinking, Hudson, the game's in early access. Why are you shitting on it so much? Give it a break, man. Well, it's been in early access for over 2.5 years. And I've played other post-apocalyptic city builders that were in early access, such as Surviving the Aftermath and Endzone, that already had these basic systems in place long before they were ever finished. And I'm currently playing Against the Storm, which also has these systems in place. Also, the devs said the game should be done by the end of the year. I don't know if you know this, but it's December already. So even if a major patch gets released within the next 20 or so days, the final product is still a half-assed mishmash of ideas taken from other games that don't work well together. There's a radiation counter on top, which hasn't been implemented yet either. You hear Geiger counter clicking sounds when it rains, but radiation doesn't appear to exist or do anything as far as I'm aware. Oh, and the temperature keeps decreasing. Once it's below 30 Celsius, you need to replace your greenhouses with level 3 ones, and your houses with level 4 ones. I couldn't be bothered to continue playing at this point, as there's nothing to do other than protect your base from raiders and raid their bases instead. This was about 92 days in. I read that once it hits negative 50 Celsius, it finally starts to go back up. Amazing endgame. By the way, like other devs that work on early access titles, These geniuses are working on another title simultaneously. Brilliant. Why the fuck do devs do this? How about you finish a fucking game first before moving on to the next one? Also, one of the devs is Russian and another is Ukrainian. Last patch was released in August. For all I know, these guys might be fucking conscripted right now. Either way, this game has a long way to go. Most of the mechanics need to be either redone from scratch or just scrapped altogether. The Last Haven is available for $20. For that price, you might as well just pick up Surviving the Aftermath or Endzone when they go on sale, or spend an extra $10 and buy them full price. Personally, out of these three post-apocalyptic settlement builders, Endzone is the best in my opinion. I personally feel that the finished version of Surviving the Aftermath is worse than it was when it was in early access. The way you start by having survivalists now instead of normal people doesn't make sense, and the quests they added aren't interesting. But shit, what do I know? You can also check out Against the Storm, which is still in early access unlike the other two, which are now finished products. And yeah, you can check that out if you want to spend your time raging against useless beavers and lizardmen. I'm Private Hudson. I'm signing out. I'll see you folks next time. This is the message that pops up when you try to load a saved game. Are you sure you want to download the game? The game's already downloaded, buddy. I also like that the text in the upper left-hand corner was never translated. Oh well, at least the developer gave a positive review of his own game on Steam.